The pen was already moving when the voice came from the back of the room. Sylvia Hartwell had not slept in 31 hours. She knew this because she had counted them, the way she had counted everything since she was 12 years old. Methodically, without sentimentality, because numbers were the one thing in her life that had never lied to her. She was 41, the CEO of Hartwell Capital Group, and she was about to sign the company her father had built over 30 years into the hands of people who had engineered its collapse. The boardroom on the 52nd floor of the Bay Street Tower was cold, the way expensive rooms always are. Temperature-controlled, soul-controlled, the kind of cold that settles into your collar and stays there. Rain slid down the floor to siling windows in long gray sheets. Toronto in November. Even the sky looked like it was filing for bankruptcy. Her CFO, Brendan Marsh, had laid out the documents 20 minutes ago with the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment. Signature pages clipped, flagged in yellow. Her legal counsel, a woman named Patricia, sat to her left and said nothing, which was the thing she was being paid $300 an hour to do. Mrs. Hartwell. Brendan's voice was level. Patient the way a man is patient when he already knows the outcome. The creditors need confirmation by 4. We're at 3:47. Sylvia looked at the document. Really looked at it. The company was $340 million in debt. Operational capital had drained over the past 14 months and a pattern her finance team had attributed to market contraction and a series of bad acquisitions in the Alberta energy corridor. She had trusted the numbers. She had trusted the people reporting the numbers. She had been wrong. The pen touched the page. There's a problem with line 43. The voice was quiet, not aggressive, not urgent even. It came from the far end of the room, near the service entrance, and it was so out of place in that boardroom that 3 people actually looked at the ceiling first, as if the words had come from a speaker. Sylvia did not look at the ceiling. She looked at the man. He was standing beside a cart loaded with cleaning supplies. Industrial-grade glass cleaner, squeegees, microfiber cloths folded with an almost obsessive precision. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, dark-haired, wearing the gray uniform of the building's contracted cleaning service. He had a smear of blue solution on his left forearm. He was holding a folded piece of paper. He did not look like someone who should be in this room. "Excuse me," Brendan said. "Line 43, the man repeated. He did not raise his voice. He did not apologize for speaking. The adjusted net operating figure. "It's wrong." There was a silence in the room that lasted long enough to become something else. Not silence anymore, but pressure. Brendan recovered first. "Security can escort you out. I'm not disrupting anything." The man set down his squeegee. He had a French-Canadian accent, faint but present, the kind that shows up more when you're choosing your words carefully. "I've been cleaning this floor for 6 months. Last Tuesday, when the finance team left the projector on, they left the full operating ledger on screen. I was here for 40 minutes cleaning the glass. I had time to read it." Patricia, the lawyer, made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "You read a $340 million financial ledger," Brendan said, "while cleaning windows." "I read a lot of things," the man said simply. "I used to do something else." Sylvia had not moved. The pen was still in her hand, still touching the page, but she had not pressed down. Something in the way he spoke, not pleading, not performing, just stating, made her hold. "What's your name?" she asked. "Lucien Gagnon, Mr. Gagnon." She said his name carefully. "What do you think you saw on line 43? He unfolded the paper he was holding. He had written the numbers by hand, she realized, columns, cross-references, margin notes in small, neat print. He had done it from memory. "Your adjusted net operating loss for Q3 is listed as $87.4 million, he said. "But if you back out the intercompany transfer that runs through the Cayman-registered subsidiary, HCG Meridian Holdings, you get a different number. You get a loss of $31.2 million. The rest of it, $56.2 million, transferred out in 11 separate transactions between August and October. All of them below the threshold that triggers automatic disclosure. All of them coded as operational write-offs." The room was very still. "That's not possible," Brendan said. "Those write-offs were reviewed." "By who?" Lucien asked. Brendan opened his mouth, closed it. Sylvia put the pen down. She did not slam it. She set it down with the deliberateness of someone who has just made a decision that cannot be unmade. She looked at Patricia. She looked at Brendan. She looked at the 11 people seated around that table, creditors' representatives, restructuring advisors, legal counsel, and she thought about how every single one of them had come into this room today already knowing how it was going to end. "Get me the Meridian Ledger," she said. "Sylvia?" Brendan started. "Not from you," she stood, "from Iti direct pull, right now." Lucien Gagnon had grown up in Rouyn-Noranda, a mining town in northwestern Quebec, the second of 4 children. His father had worked at the horn smelter for 22 years. His mother had kept the books for 3 small businesses on the main street and had taught Lucien, by the time he was 9, that numbers tell stories if you let them. He had been good at school in the way that doesn't get rewarded in small towns. Quietly exceptional, without the social scaffolding to make anyone notice. He had gone to HEC Montreal on a partial scholarship, studied finance, graduated in the top 8% of his cohort. He had worked for 4 years at a mid-sized accounting firm in Montreal, the kind of place that bills itself as a boutique firm and means it. He had been good at finding things that weren't supposed to be found. Then his wife had gotten sick. Ovarian cancer, stage 3, diagnosed when their daughter Camille was 14 months old. They had 2 years of something that Lucien did not talk about and would not describe as a fight, because the word fight implied there was a chance of winning, and he had known from the first oncologist meeting that there was not. Sophie had died on a Tuesday morning in April, with the window open because she had always wanted to hear the birds when she woke up. Camille was now 4. She had her mother's eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness, and she called her stuffed rabbit Monsieur Carotte. And she was, Lucien had concluded, the entire point. He had moved to Toronto 14 months ago because his sister Marguerite lived here and offered to help with Camille while he got back on his feet. Getting back on his feet had proven harder than anticipated. His Quebec credentials needed Ontario recertification. His employment gap, 2 years of caregiving, needed explaining in interviews where people listened politely and then didn't call back. He had taken the cleaning contract because it paid reliably and let him be home by 6. He had not planned to read the ledger. But the projector had been left on, and the numbers had been wrong, and Lucien Gagnon had never been able to look at wrong numbers without knowing exactly how wrong they were. The IT director arrived on the 52nd floor at 4:12, which meant the creditors. 4 o'clock deadline had come and gone without Sylvia's signature. The creditor's lead representative, a man named Ashford, who wore his displeasure in his jaw, informed Patricia that this delay constituted a material breach. "Then note it," Sylvia said, and turned back to her laptop. The Meridian Ledger came through at 4:29. Sylvia went through it with Lucien standing at the opposite end of the boardroom table, not hovering, not offering to help, just available. He had accepted a cup of coffee from the assistant who'd brought it and held it in both hands without drinking, the way someone does when the gesture matters more than the liquid. It took Sylvia 40 minutes to find the first of what turned out to be 14 transfers. "They're backdated," she said, mostly to herself. 11 of them, Lucien confirmed. The other 3 are dated correctly but routed through a dormant entity. HCG Pacific Ventures, dissolved 2019. Patricia looked up from her notepad. "How do you know it was dissolved in 2019? I looked it up when? Last Wednesday." Another silence, a different kind. Sylvia sat back in her chair and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes for a moment. Not a gesture of despair, but of recalibration, the way you push reset on something you need to use again. She took her hands down and looked at Brendan Marsh, who had not spoken in 30 minutes, and who had, she noticed now, moved his chair approximately 6 inches back from the table. 6 inches, the geometry of guilt. "Brendan," she said, "who authorized the Meridian transfers?" He said nothing. "There are 14 transfers totaling $56.2 million, she said. "Each one routed to avoid disclosure thresholds. Each one coded as a write-off by someone with senior authorization access. There are 4 people in this company with that level of access. I'm one of them. Marcus Frey is in Singapore. Dana Lim went on medical leave in July. She paused. That leaves you. Brendan Marsh stood up. He did it quickly with the controlled urgency of a man who has been calculating exit angles for some time. He said something about needing to make a call. He said something else about this being a mischaracterization. He used the word contextual in a way that meant nothing. He walked toward the door. "Lock it," Sylvia said. The building's head of security, who had been waiting in the hallway since Sylvia called him at 4:15, locked it. The next 72 hours were not linear. They rarely are when something large collapses. The RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit was contacted that evening. Hartwell Capital's external auditors, a firm that had not been Brendan's first recommendation, began a forensic review the following morning. A freezing order was placed on 4 accounts connected to HCG Meridian Holdings within 36 hours, based on documentation that Sylvia's legal team filed in federal court with what Patricia later described as uncommon speed. The $56.2 million had not, it turned out, simply vanished. It had been staged, moved through Meridian to a holding structure in the Cayman Islands, from which Brendan had been planning to repatriate it in tranches over the following 2 years, routed through a numbered company registered to his brother-in-law. He had been doing this since the previous September. He had chosen a moment when Sylvia was managing 2 simultaneous acquisitions and a board restructuring and was, by any reasonable estimate, too busy to look carefully at subsidiary reporting. He had been wrong about that. He had been wrong about a lot of things. The bankruptcy filing never went through. The creditors, presented with evidence of fraud rather than genuine insolvency, renegotiated. The $56.2 million, once the freezing orders were actioned and repatriation proceedings began, was recoverable. Not all of it, not immediately, but enough. Sylvia's lawyers described it as a better outcome than anyone had expected on a Tuesday morning when the pen was already moving. Lucien went back to his shift on Thursday. He had told his supervisor he'd been delayed by a building matter on the 52nd floor, and his supervisor had nodded in the specific way that supervisors nod when they have decided not to ask follow-up questions. He was cleaning the glass on the 48th floor when Sylvia Hartwell found him. She came alone, which surprised him. No assistant, no lawyer, no one to manage the optics. She was wearing the same dark blazer she'd had on Tuesday, which meant she probably hadn't gone home yet either. "Mr. Gagnon." He set down the squeegee. "Miss Hartwell." She looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone who is choosing between several things to say and discarding most of them. "You didn't have to come forward," she said finally. "I know. Most people wouldn't have. I know that too." She was quiet for a moment. The city spread out below the glass he had just cleaned. Gray and enormous and indifferent in the way that cities are, even the ones you've chosen to live in. "I made some calls," Sylvia said, "about your Ontario recertification. The processing timeline is—" She paused, selecting her words. "It's administrative. There's no substantive barrier. It was moving slowly because those things move slowly when no one is paying attention to them. Someone is paying attention to it now." Lucien looked at her. "I'm also short a senior forensic analyst," she continued. "Permanently short, as it turns out." The role was Brendan's second hire. It was supposed to be an independent check on the CFO function. He chose someone he could manage. She said this without bitterness, simply as fact. "I need someone I can't manage. Someone who will tell me when a number is wrong." "I have a 4-year-old, Lucien said. "The position comes with standard Hartwell benefits. Parental accommodation policy. Flexible hours within the senior team structure." She paused. "I also have a daughter. She's 17. When she was 4, I needed someone to remind me that she was 4, occasionally. I was not always good at that." It was the most personal thing she had said to him, and she said it quickly, as if she needed to get it out before she reconsidered. Lucia picked up his squeegee. He looked at the glass, then at the city behind it, then at Sylvia Hartwell, who was watching him with the particular stillness of someone who asks for very little and has therefore learned to wait. "I'll need to talk to my sister," he said. "Of course, and I want it in writing that the role has independent reporting authority. Not to the CFO, not to legal, directly to the board's audit committee." Sylvia almost smiled. You've thought about this. I've had a few days. Camille Gagnon turned 5 in February in the apartment in East York that still had Sophie's handwriting on the inside of the kitchen cupboard, a grocery list from 4 years ago that Lucien had never been able to paint over. The party was small. Marguerite made a maple cream cake. There was a rabbit balloon. Monsieur Carotte attended. Lucien sat at the small kitchen table after Camille was asleep, a cup of tea going cold beside him, and thought about the particular shape of the year that had just passed. He thought about a Tuesday afternoon in November when the wrong number had been the right decision. He thought about the ledger left glowing on the glass of the 52nd floor, and whether it had been accident or something else. He was not a superstitious man. He had learned too early that the world does not arrange itself around what people deserve, but sometimes numbers line up in ways that feel, if not like fate, then at least like clarity, like a correction. He turned off the kitchen light and checked the door and went to bed, and outside the window, Toronto was quiet in the way it gets on February nights, cold and clean, and no longer indifferent, at least not to him.